All right, guys. So this is chapter 4. We're going to be going over our fair housing rules and regulations. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with our federal laws, and then what we're going to do is we are going to switch over to our state law. Okay, our New Jersey state law. So we're going to end on the New Jersey state law. But what we're going to do first and foremost is go over the two federal laws. Okay, two amendments that were made to one of those laws. Then we're going to go into three different types of discriminatory practices, okay? And then we're going to end on the New Jersey law. So let's first start out with the biggest one, Civil Rights Act of 1866. Okay? The Civil Rights Act of 1866 does not allow for discrimination based on race. Okay, you cannot discriminate based on race. Now, what I want you to understand is this: I'm going to be referring to different things as protected classes. So whenever they say you cannot discriminate against someone based on them being of a certain blank, that right there would be considered a protected class. So the protected classes for the Civil Rights Act of 1866 is that of race. You cannot discriminate based on race. And there's one key thing about this, okay, that I want you to understand. There are no exceptions to this rule, okay? And what I want you to do when you're going through your book, I want you to get a deeper dive. I'm not going to go into it in the lecture because I really want you to get a good understanding of the laws and a couple of the dates. There's minutia in regards to what exceptions exist, okay? And I actually might make a separate video where I go through all the exceptions in the fair housing laws. But I think that when you're first learning the laws and what they cover, that's more important than going through the exceptions with a fine-tooth comb, because again, those could get a little wonky, especially when you get to state-specific stuff. So, Civil Rights Act of 1866 allows for no exceptions, and it covers the protected class of race. Then we have our second federal law, which is the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. Okay. So the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968, that is going to be covering, okay, race, color, religion, national origin, okay, and ancestry. Okay. So the protected classes in there are race, color, religion, national origin, and ancestry. So you cannot discriminate based on any of those characteristics. Now, there were two amendments to this law. Okay. In 1974, there was an amendment made that covered sex or gender. Okay. So, and I know in 2020 that gender could be interpreted many different ways. When I'm referring to gender, I'm referring to male, female. Okay. Male, female, you cannot discriminate in housing or lending based on their sex, their gender. Okay. So that is exactly what they meant in 1974 when they passed that amendment. Okay. Next one was in 88. And 88 is an interesting one. Okay. Because there's a couple things that happened. They added mental and physical handicaps. And they explicitly included AIDS victims and familial status. So what happens is, and Stu, why did they include AIDS victims? That seems odd in 2020. Well, you have to realize they're coming off of the AIDS pandemic. So there was a lot of discrimination against people who had AIDS, who were victims of AIDS. Okay. So you were in a situation where the time mattered, and they felt that that was important to explicitly include that in the mental and physical handicaps. They consider that a physical handicap. Okay. So what I will tell you is this: when we're talking about mental and physical handicaps, there's a couple things that I also want to make sure that you understand in regards to mental and physical handicaps. So they'll ask you questions along the lines of, Are alcoholics in treatment considered to be a protected class based on the categorization of mental and physical handicaps? So my question to you guys is this, and type it in the chat box if you're here with me live. Are alcoholics in treatment considered to be protected classes? Why don't you let me know what you think? So alcoholics in treatment, are they a protected class? Leslie says yes. Some people, Shakira said no. And then I have a yes from Crystal, capital letters, screaming it out. And so they are. So Carlos said it's not visible. Can I adjust the font? See if it's fuzzy on your end, you might want to reload. I've been using this font for months, so let me know, guys, if it's still fuzzy, if Carlos is just the only one experiencing that. However, what I will say is this: the mental and physical handicaps, okay, alcoholics in treatment, okay, in treatment are going to be considered. They are going to be considered having a mental handicap. Now, I'm going to ask you another question. Drug abusers in treatment, are they considered to be drug abusers in treatment? Are they considered to be a protected class? So drug abusers are going to be not a protected class because drugs are illegal. They're looked at as criminals. That's looked at as criminal activities. So that situation is they are. So Crystal said even now with the opioid crisis, that actually is a really good thing that you bring that up. According to the 88 amendment, drug abusers are not going to be considered a protected class in regards to housing under the Federal Fair Housing Act of 68 under the 88 amendment. There has been no other amendment since 88. So are we due for an amendment? Are we due for a change? Maybe, potentially. I see personally, and again, this is just my take. This is just my opinion. I think that with recent rulings, recent opinions that have been drafted, that sex and gender are going to be widened to include sexual orientation. Okay, whether you agree, disagree with that, whatever the case may be, that's for a totally other conversation. I will tell you this, that is probably coming down the pipeline at some manner, shape, or form. But I would say also with the opioid crisis, with a lot of things going on, context matters. That's why new laws are passed, and that's why there is an amendment process. So I could see this changing in the near future to broaden. Okay. But also, I think that a lot of states, and when we get into the New Jersey state specific law, you'll see a lot of states in regards to the state level laws and regulations cover a lot more than the federal one does. So I don't know even then if there's a necessity on a federal level to include these as opposed to just kicking it back to the states. Okay. So that being said, those are the federal laws in regards to discrimination. Okay. Now, we're going to put that on the side because there are, again, exceptions to some of those where you could discriminate based on a couple of things. You can never discriminate on race or color, though. Okay, race or color, because here's the thing. Civil Rights Act of 1866, okay, that covers race, and depending on what teacher you speak to, covers color as well. It really depends on who you're asking about that, okay? It depends on who you're asking about that, okay? So this is what I will say in regards to that. I will say never in race or color, but the other things, there are times that you could discriminate. I'll give you a couple of examples just so that you're not completely lost when you're reading your text. One is a private club, okay? Like my wife and I, we belong to the Cornell Club, okay? What is the Cornell Club? That's where Cornell alumni, and no, I am not that smart. That's my wife. My wife brings the brains. I bring the charm. So what happens is this. We are members of the Cornell Club, and there's separate housing, there's separate rentals that we have access to that the general public does not, okay? And as long as membership to the As long as membership to the club is not discriminatory in nature. Like the Cornell Club didn't say no blacks allowed, or no Jews allowed, or we're not going to allow someone from national origin, from the Middle East, to join. As long as the club was not discriminatory in nature, then you could discriminate based on being a member or not. Okay, that is one way you could do that. There are some age restrictions that you could discriminate against. Also, owner-occupied residence, owner-occupied buildings, you could, okay, and it's 1 to 4 family owner-occupied, you could discriminate based on everything except race or color. Okay, race or color is the one that you can't. So like if you said, hey, I want a same-sex roommate, things like that, that's absolutely acceptable. That's totally understandable. And they allow you to discriminate based on that. Okay, that is absolutely fine. However, when it comes to this this situation here, you can never do it based on race or color, but the other ones have some exceptions to them. Now, any questions so far, or can we keep going? Because I want to go into the 3 discriminatory practices. Okay, and those are steering, redlining, okay, and blockbusting, also known as panic peddling, also known as panic selling. And I like to expose you guys to a lot of the different words that you'll see, okay? So in regards to this, I like to expose you to a lot of the different words that you'll see that are going to be synonyms to one another, that are going to be situations where you're going to see maybe different wording based on the textbook, based on the study material that you're learning, based on the information. So all that kind of stuff. Now, let's start with the first one, steering, okay? Steering is... All right, let me get that. Steering is when you channel buyers or direct buyers to or away from an area. Okay, so that's steering. So let's say you take someone to a certain town because you're like, oh, I think they would be more comfortable here because they'd be with, more whatever types of people. Okay, that's steering. Okay, that's steering. That is a very illegal practice. Okay, no bueno. The next one is redlining. So what redlining is this. Okay, redlining. Oh no, I don't want to do that. I want to change it back to blue. I like the blue. Redlining is this. When you get to a situation where you get a certain geography on a map and you draw a red line and you say, we're not going to be lending to people in that area. Okay, so what happens is this is lending, also insuring, denying people of certain protected classes, loans, and insurance in a particular area. So what happens is this, okay? So it's not that they're not going to lend money at all in that area. It's that they're not lending money at all to you in that area, okay? To your people in that area, whatever it is that you belong to, as long as it's one of the protected classes, okay? That is redlining, all right? So the next one is panic peddling or blockbusting. Here's what this is. Panic peddling, blockbusting is there. So these are all synonyms for one another, okay? This is when you induce fear of a protected class moving in or out of an area. Okay, and you're causing someone to sell because of that. When you induce fear of a protected class moving in or out of an area. So basically, think of it this way. You're saying to them, those people are moving in. Those people are moving in, or those people are moving out. That might be very desirable, those people. Okay, whatever it is, if that is a member of a protected class, you are inducing fear in a way that is not legal. You cannot blockbust. And just so you know, HUD, the Housing and Urban Development, they enforce all of these. Okay, so sometimes they'll send out testers to see, are you steering people? Okay, You know, are you sending, you know, the Asian family to this town, and then are you sending the European family to this town? Okay, that is going to be steering. Okay, they check to see if you're doing things like that. There's also discriminatory language in regards to advertising that you cannot use. There's some that legally you cannot use. There's some that the MLSs, which is the multiple listing service, there's some that they say you cannot use. So it really depends on the situation. Okay. But do any of you guys have any questions on that, on the 3 illegal practices: steering, redlining, and blockbusting? Any questions? Nothing. Okay. So what we're going to do, because I want you guys to really take a dive into this chapter if you can. Okay. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about the New Jersey state specific law. Okay. We're going to talk about that in regards to what that covers. And this is why people get confused. Law Against Discrimination. This is why people get confused. Okay. Because here's the thing. In New Jersey, everything is covered. Basically, as long as you're not a criminal, like you're a protected class in some manner, shape, or form. Okay. So let me tell you what those are, what all those protected classes are. And I have to use my book to actually see what they all are, because they update them so much. Like literally from the last book to this one, they updated them a ton. So it's going to cover race. It's going to cover color. It's going to cover national origin. Okay. Ancestry. They specifically outline creed, which is also another name for religion. And they use religion explicitly as well. Then they say sex, gender identity. Okay. So gender dysphoria, anything like that. Okay. Sexual orientation. Sexual orientation. Marital status. I told you this was a lot. Familial status. Actual or perceived mental handicap. Okay. Source of lawful income. Okay. And liability. No, I'm not going to add that one in. That's it. That's it. So, yeah, do you now see how you could get totally confused? So there's a question on the test that is asked all the time, and it goes something like this. It says, based on federal fair housing or the Fair Housing Act, which of these is not a protected class? And you would have, I think it's something like Jew, Arab, single mother, and then homosexual. Okay. And they'll say H sexual. Okay. So the answer is homosexual, even though it is covered in the New Jersey state law, as it is covered in many other state laws. The situation is this. According to the Fair Housing Act, okay, according to fair housing, homosexual is not covered. However, would you be allowed to discriminate against them ever? No, because your state law prohibits it, okay? Your state law prohibits it. So that's the situation when it comes to the, and I'm going to actually go back so that you guys could see that again, the New Jersey Law Against Discrimination, okay? And guys, that is about all I really want to cover tonight, because I really do want you to get a good, nice read on the chapter, because I think that this is a chapter that you really need to understand as best as possible. There are a lot of confusing questions that come out of this chapter, and I want to make sure that you guys know and understand it as best as possible. That's why, like I said, I start with the Surface level stuff, the stuff that I think you should know right off the bat. Okay. I talked to you about the logistics of how the questions would be asked. We talk about the anti-discrimination activities, like you cannot do steering, redlining, block busing. We talk about those. And guys, that's about it. Okay. That's about it. This is chapter 4 in your book. Okay. So if you guys have no other questions, let me know. If you do have any other questions, type that in your in the chat box. Okay. I'm going to stop the recording now. So this is where the recording will end.